I'm really glad to be spending time today with Laura Meyer. And Laura's going to challenge the title of this webinar, but it's about positioning your brand to win at franchise sales. But as you're going to see as we go through this, this is really something deeper than sales. It's really about branding. It's about getting to the core of your franchise brand or your business. And so really excited about today's webinar. And for those of you who don't know, Laura Meyer is founder of Joybrand Creative, but she's so much more than that. Laura's been in the franchise world extensively as a franchisor, as a vendor, and so she brings a very unique perspective where Laura knows every angle of franchising, knows branding, and more important, and something we're going to talk about today, Laura is part of education-based sales, digital sales, and a lot of the sales methodologies or marketing or digital development that I personally believe far too many franchisors ignore in their franchise sales process and in their consumer sales processes. So good afternoon, Laura.
Hi, thanks for having me. And thank you for everybody who's attending or watching after this recording. It's great to meet you. And I can't wait to share with you what I know and love about building a brand.
Laura, just generally, just some perspective for what we're going to talk about. Just generally, Joybrand Creative and what services do you provide? And really, where's your focus?
Yeah, so brands, national brands who are franchisors, and I also do a lot of work for thought leaders and influencers tend to hire me for one of two reasons. They have some kind of breakthrough that they need in their marketing strategy, whether it be a lead flow breakthrough or they need to help with they have poor retention and they need help with customer journey mapping, or they simply need a brand platform from which all marketing and sales initiatives are built. The other thing that I'm an agency, so we offer content marketing services, mostly organic. We'll do a little bit of paid traffic. I have some opinions about paid traffic, but we'll layer some paid on top of organic strategies that are already working, but inbound content marketing services for both B2B, which is usually more of a kind of inbound marketing strategy, and then B2C is usually social selling.
So Laura, so my focus, right, the focus for these webinars is really toward emerging franchise brands, which you know and have lived.
I've lived it, and I still am alive to tell the story, so that's good.
Right, and so what I'm looking for is that missing element. I think all of our webinars have pieces to that puzzle, but for today's webinar, right, we're going to go through it. I think my big focus, or what I'm so interested in speaking to you about is really digital lead gen, which you were talking about. What would you hope is the biggest takeaway when we're done with this webinar for emerging brands?
I mean, I think that a couple big takeaways. The first is that without a solid brand strategy, like your marketing and your sales are just going to feel like they're totally disjointed all over the place, inconsistent, and you're just going to feel like you're chasing your tail until you have a really strong brand strategy. And I meet multi-million-dollar brands that need to go backwards and recreate their brand strategy. So if you can be intentional about it from the beginning, it's going to save you a lot of time, stress, and money down the road. So I would say that's the first thing. The second thing is that I bring a unique perspective in the sense that I play in both the online entrepreneurial circles. I network in those circles. I hang out those circles. I invest in courses and programs in those circles, along with having experience in franchising. And it's really interesting because it's two very different worlds, right? Franchising is a pretty traditional distribution model for your brand. And this online entrepreneurship is very cutting edge, very fast moving, very much focused on digital. And honestly, I think there's things that, I bring a lot from traditional business into the conversations I have with online business owners and to the podcast that I'm on. And I bring a lot of the strategies that I learn from the digital and online world into franchising and traditional business and apply it in unique ways. So it's kind of fun to be in both, even though it can be hard on the schedule sometimes.
Right. So what I thought in preparing for the webinar, when we were speaking about an hour ago, and again, I won't get into it now, but I hope it comes out during this, I'm sure it will, was I was blown away when you were just saying, hey, I'm surprised certain brands, why don't they have their own online summits, right? Or as lead gen and education based. And I like that's a great perspective, and yet you don't see it. And one of, we were sharing, or my biggest concern is that, emerging brands need to do things differently. They need the right strategy. And instead, I find they're playing the game that the big brands are playing without the budgets.
Yep.
It's not going to be as effective. And then, what I think too, as we get to your, I think you're correct. I think brand strategy is everything. Ironically for us, even at our law firm, really focusing on our brand, our value proposition, what we do, and all of those things, core values, has influenced everything, from how we approach our legal work, our client relations. And so I think those are great goals. And so I'm looking forward to talking about different things, right?
Yeah.
So Laura, you mentioned brand strategy years ago. If someone told me brand strategy, I'd be like, is it really that important? My observation is people will franchise their business. They will invest in PR. They will sell franchises. They will even succeed, right? Sell 50 units, 100 units, sell 25 units. And many times they've never taken the time to develop a brand strategy, right? It just sort of happens, evolves, and it doesn't really get there. So talk about the process of what does a brand strategy mean to you, and what's the process?
It's a solid brand platform, again, from which all sales and marketing decisions are made. And when I say marketing, I mean product mix, placement, who you're serving. And I'll say that that I learned the value of this from one of my clients. So I was brought in by a very seasoned CEO on a franchise brand, that grew significantly. I always have to be careful because I'm in NDAs, but I will say they were already in 8 figures, and they doubled their 8-figure system-wide sales in about 18 months. And this is where we started. And we started here for a reason. And he had said to me, I always know that we start here. And this is an operations finance guy, and somebody who, probably everybody who's listening would know him. And he said, we always start here because it's so powerful. And I was glad, because a lot of times a seasoned CEO, franchise CEO who's very operations focused, the last thing he's working on is brand strategy, right? But he's an evolved C-suite executive and really understood the importance of it. So we spent about 3 months intensively working on the brand platform. I flew out, I created a draft, presented it to the executive team. We worked through it together over the next few months. We honed in on it. They were in the process of hiring a marketing department, really. So that was a great timing for us to get their feedback. And then I will tell you, their sales and marketing took off. And there was lots of operational infrastructure investments that brand made in addition to shaping up the brand platform. With that said, I don't think that those programs would have been anywhere nearly as effective or consistent or cohesive in terms of cutting through the noise online and really creating effective marketing, intentional, thoughtful, purposeful marketing without this work being done first. And so, I'm just starting to work with a thought leader right now that has millions of online followers, huge business. And she just is feels like she's all over the place. And I was like, we've got to go back to the brand platform. She never made it, she never created it. So I think it's really good to get really clear on those mission, vision, values on your target. Do some good, intentional, vivid vision exercises. Because a lot of times early stage founders, and I know you because I get you because I've been where you are, it's all up here. And you forget, because everybody around you, because it's all up here, you forget that everyone around you, they don't know that. Or maybe you've mentioned it a few times, but they still don't get it. And so they can't make intentional decisions without you at scale until it is on paper and everybody signed off on it. And then it becomes part of your new employee onboarding, and it just becomes part of your franchisee sales process. And it just makes everything gel together. And then really intentional market position. And I think this is something to look at annually. I went into a very large company. Actually, the testimonials on my website was Massage Heights. I went in over the summer with them, and we did market repositioning exercise, and we did it, fortunately, because they're a bigger brand, they can invest in high quality data. We were able to create a classic market positioning grid. But I think, again, it's never too early to do that, because you can lose your market position really easily with competitors coming into the marketplace, or, you never really look at how your offers stack up against everybody else's. And all of a sudden you can all be singing the same song to the customer, which is super confusing. And I always say, like, in the absence of differentiation, the customer will always default to price. And that's the last thing you want them to do. So really getting clear on those points of differentiation that make you so unique from anybody else in your space, having a clear, easy to understand value proposition. So I've built out sales training programs because I can do both marketing and sales. And I'll say, without a really strong value prop, like, doesn't matter, it could be the best sales training program in the world. If people if the 21-year-old who's answering the phone at the unit level can't clearly, easily communicate the value prop, again, the next question is going to be how much, right? A brand promise and a series of specific avatars that you're marketing to. And listen, some of the early stage brands can be like, I can't do focus groups. I can't do, a big data analysis at this point, Charles, like 2 or 3 years ago, it might've been in the tens of thousands. You can get them for about $1,200 or $1,400 now. So they've definitely come down in price. But if you just have no data, you have no history, just really sitting in a room and trying to look at who are your best customers, what do they have in common, is just a great starting point. Because again, it's hard to hire an ad agency, or it's hard to start marketing if you don't know who you're talking to. It'll just look really generic and watered down and kind of boring, to be honest. And then a consistent tone, messaging, and identity idea, designed to attract your ideal audience. A lot of times people think branding is identity. Most people who are listening probably have pretty good identity. They probably don't need rebranding. If you need rebranding, you're probably going to have to pause for a little while and recreate the brand identity. But it's such a small part of brand strategy. I usually am not doing that kind of work with a brand unless they're pretty early stage. It's, as you can tell, brand strategy goes way beyond a logo, and it goes much deeper into, a foundation from which you will cross-reference all sales and marketing decisions moving forward.
It's interesting because as you're speaking, I'm thinking of what are examples of not having the strategy aligned. And you mentioned a great example, which is something I think I see every day in the franchise industry, which is a lot of the franchise sales or the franchisor marketing sounds the same. And it's because the easy thing to do is it's not easy, but it's what the industry is telling everyone. Okay, right. So I'm a franchisor. I'm an emerging brand. I'm going to spend X dollars with an agency or with someone. They're going to do pay-per-click ads or a couple of pieces. And your point is they're probably all going to sound the same and boring. And it's because they're not at their core grounded by a brand strategy, which I'd even challenge many brands if I ask them, what is your unique selling proposition? What makes you different? Their first reaction is we may not be that different from other people or other competing brands. And that's not the case.
Yeah. I work with a lot of founder CEOs, and that is hard for a founder to really come to terms with, right? Because we all think that what we invented and what we created out of our heart and soul is so unique. But that is one of the things that's kind of different typically about like a hired CEO, which is so interesting because I see them come in, there's no emotion attached. They're just sort of like, I get that what I created here, it actually isn't that different. Or maybe it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but it's no longer that different and we've got to recalibrate. And there's really nothing wrong with that. It's just, if you don't, you're going to end up just price competing. That's really what it comes down to. You're going to end up on Groupon, and that's how you're going to get your customers. And like, it's just going to create a whole bunch of issues in your margin structure. And so the good news is actually we've never been in a better time to have a unique, differentiated brand. I think that we're getting into, a consumer base with the millennials where they care about different and unique, and they care about, social benefit. Actually, this is something I started doing with my agency, Charles. I didn't even tell you, but every time we sign a client now, it funds a microfinance effort in a third world country. So, people love that. Like, they love hearing that. I do it because it happens to be an organization that I believe in. But they, the degree to which people will buy, because the purpose and intention behind the brand has increased significantly in the last 10 years. So that's the good news. The bad news is really noisy out there. And so if you don't have a great brand strategy, what it shows up with, Charles, is, ineffective marketing or expensive marketing. I'll say, like, you're burning through money on paid traffic because you're not, what you're saying is not that different. So you actually have to buy, you have to buy your way out of that problem. That's one thing that shows up. Second thing is how it shows up is that you are super confused. Like, there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of confusion in the market, in the marketing team. Sometimes the founder feels kind of confused, like, I don't know, should we be offering this or that? The product mix doesn't necessarily make sense. You have a good variety of price points. The messaging's all over the place. It seems like this is for this person, but this is for this person, but it's within the same brand, offering. So it starts getting kind of muddy. And that's when you know that that's what it really looks like.
What's interesting, and I sort of not disagree, but different approach, and I really value what you're saying here, is you're a big advocate that if you get your brand positioning correct for your end user customers, it's also going to correct your positioning for franchisees or for franchise sales.
Yes. Yeah. And I'll say that my background is 100% consumer marketing. Or B2B marketing. Like, I work with a lot of coaches. I have a coaching program. I know that space well. My experience with franchise sales is limited to my own brand. I will say that when we did franchise sales, our cost per sale was about $1,000, which is extremely rare. As you know. And when I've worked with other franchisors on their fran dev strategy, what has surprised me is how little innovation is happening in the franchise development space. Some of that is a brand strategy issue. Like, I think that ultimately when a franchisee comes to your brand and they are a well-versed business person, one of the first things they're going to wonder is why would the consumer choose you, right? Choose your brand over the brand down the street. That's, in my experience, a pretty common question of a franchisee. And being able to articulate that is going to probably really help franchise sales. But then also, I think those unique digital lead gen strategies are also super important.
I look, I saw, your systems, and well, what was interesting when we'd seeing in the franchise space, how all of your messaging, your franchisee presentations, your consumer presentations, your entire focus, and were all consistent and integrated. And then the other interesting thing is, speaking with you and your team, you just knew there was a genuineness behind it, right? Yeah. You guys lived and believed it. And so, for anyone listening, this is, I think, the missing gap for most emerging brands is brand strategy. And as Laura explains, it's so much more than your logo. And if right now you're on this webinar, you're listening to it, you can articulate and your team can articulate mission, vision, values, right? It's not in writing. You don't have your differentiators, your 2, 3, whatever they are, but you can articulate those differentiators and your team can't. And you don't know things like your brand promise. I can tell you that it is the missing link, and anything you spend without having it is not wasted, but it's ineffective. It's really not going to charge up. And then as we talk a little more, I think Laura's point is critical, which is there hasn't been innovation. But I promise this, without the brand strategy, you can't take advantage of the innovation that we're about to talk about, or what Laura's focused on. So I jumped the gun a little, because one of my questions, Laura, was how do you differentiate the brand story between your end user customers versus your prospective franchisees? And your point is be laser focused on the customers and that'll take care of the franchisees, right?
That was always my approach, right? I think that, we dabbled a little bit just because people told us we should with outside sales reps and things like that. It always just came back to our executive team on doing the sales. First of all, because in the beginning stages, I wanted to know who these people were that were coming into my brand. And then second of all, I think ultimately, in franchising in general, right? Unit level economics is the name of the game. And so if you have great consumer brand strategy, then I think it will just organically attract people who are interested in your brand and want to become a brand partner. That is really my experience. And I've seen that happen too. Like I've seen that happen with other brands that, you and I, Charles, both know, where you have a great product, it's unique in the marketplace, it's well positioned, there's a great value proposition, and the franchise prospects come. I don't want to say they just come naturally, organically. We did we had great content marketing, but I also think that when it's unique enough, you'll get the interest. And so I think about brands like Clean Juice, right? And there's one that's local to me, and I love Clean Juice. I think it's a great brand. It's a great brand example. I think they have done just a beautiful job of really attracting the right customer and then attracting the types of people that they want to own their franchises. Because I saw them, present at IFA organically. Another great example is AR Workshop, which I think is another fantastic brand, a crafting brand. From what I understand, I've been to their locations. It's a crafting community type of concept that they don't use any kind of brokers or anything like that. And their brand took off like wildfire because it's a beautiful brand. It's well communicated, well positioned, and it was unique in the marketplace. And those characteristics, I don't want to say they solve every problem when it comes to franchise sales, but it solves a lot.
No, you know what, Laura, and I think not that it's counter, but the point you're making is not one that's emphasized in the franchise world. And I think, and certainly this, if you don't have your position down for your consumers, you definitely don't have it down for franchisees. But I think that's powerful stuff, right? Especially when, we know that, over time, unit level economics is going to determine everything, right? Item 19, financial performance reps, everything's going to come from that. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about a compelling brand story. And then Laura, to get those emerging brands, anyone who's listening to this, right? So they understand the magnitude of it and really can start taking steps to at least speaking with their team and saying, hey, we really need to do better on this in 2020.
Yeah. I think telling a compelling brand story it really depends on your brand. If you are a brand that is all about fitness, probably the brand story is going to have a lot to do with the founder, her fitness story or his fitness story, the people in the brand that are kind of micro influencers. I think City Row does this really well, who is one of my clients I've worked with. They do a beautiful job at this compelling brand story that highlights not only the founder, but the lead trainers and the people who go to City Row classes as the hero of the story. Now, let's say that you have a brand that could benefit from statistics or research or infographics. Like that type of brand story that type of information is a great way to bring people into your brand story. But ultimately, our brains are wired for story. We understand we understand information better when it's presented in the context of story. And so whenever I recommend that people begin with a content strategy and that they start with story and that they start with communicating their brand through storytelling that eventually can transition into either social selling, which typically on Instagram or Facebook would end up in the Instagram or Facebook inbox, or into some kind of thought leadership presentation, webinar, PDF, white paper that can continue to reinforce the authority that person has as the brand storyteller. So that's really when I recommend organic content, that's really the type of approach that we use at our agency. And so what's really interesting about this is that there has been a trend, right, for a little bit for a while, I think, with social media, with one-way communication, with heavy technology, with lots of clicks and lots of interference between the end user and the person who's communicating. And I actually think we're trending back. So first of all, the algorithm, paid traffic is getting more and more expensive. The social media algorithm is favoring interaction and two-way communication. And I'm finding much more success, again, with social selling through inbox and chatbot, on Facebook Messenger, that I'm seeing in email funnels. So it's very interesting how I think people are starting to feel very disconnected through technology, and starting with story, but then moving that conversation to become a two-way communication is where I see things trending in the next few years in terms of online storytelling.
Which makes sense, right? And then what gets me is going back to your points. Really, that brand is the foundation for all of your content. It's what organizes your teams, and it's what makes things compelling. And I think, Laura, I really do believe that the reason why this is overlooked or not addressed the right way is because it's a difficult process. It's not an expensive process, but it really, in my experience, like when we did this and do this as a team, it involved 2-day meetings and team meetings, and really, and you think you have it, and then you realize you're just speaking generally again, and getting to the heart of why and what you're doing. So 2 questions. I think it's a process that just can't be delivered off to a third party and say, hey, do this for us. It involves, that team. And B, I think it involves facilitation by someone like you to really help bring it along and bring discipline. But what does that process look like if you were working with a brand? Like, how would it come about? Like, so I'm a franchise brand. I'm telling my team, hey, we're going to meet with Laura. We're going to dive into the core of our core values, our brand, our positioning. And like, what's that process look like? And what do you see as some of the pain points and hurdles that have to be overcome?
Usually it comes from any kind of data that they would have on hand for like the development of avatars or any type of brand positioning. And then in the past, what I've done is interviews. Like, I'll interview key customers, or I'll interview stakeholders, founder, employees, and try to put together some kind of draft to present when I would go for an in-person meeting. And so that helps expedite things. It takes it from maybe a 2-day workshop to a 1-day workshop. And then, accepting the fact that it's going to be fluid. So for example, when I went into Lash Lounge, they didn't have any personas or avatars, and they were growing pretty fast. And so when I flew out to them to do this work, I ran focus groups the day before the meeting with key customers. And I did 3 meetings in a row of 12 to 14 people each, and ran the focus groups. That's going to give you some qualitative data, but it's not going to give you qualitative data. Both would be ideal, but you know what? We couldn't fit it in before the meeting, couldn't get the surveys out, didn't have any kind of, social media data from agencies. So you start with what you have, right? So we started with what we have. Now there's more data. 18 months later, there's more information available. We're working with an agency, a bigger agency, that can look at, trends across the types of people that are engaging with the content and converting. So then you can add on more personas. So I think sometimes you just start with what you have, because it's, if you have 80% of what you'll end up with, then that is 80% better off than you would have been otherwise. And then also accept that you will continue to add on this information. They also, within the course of the last 18 months, we came up with a value proposition, and they changed one of the elements of it because they found that in the marketplace, it wasn't sticking as they were growing. And I think, again, that's very normal. It's going to be fluid. And you just kind of know that. But again, that's not a reason not to do the work, because if you don't do the work, you're going to end up having to go backwards.
So, and I don't know if you could talk about it, But using Lash Lounge as an example, like what are one of their core values or differentiators that you think make them very unique?
Trying to think if it's public facing. I think it probably is.
Anything that just public, right? I wouldn't go into.
Yeah, I'm just like thinking if it is. Yeah, because I have to be careful. But I would say, I mean, they were first to market. So I would say anytime that a brand is first to market, that's awesome. You got a lot going for you when you're first to market. You're the pioneer. You can claim that space. You can own it. And I would say that that is a characteristic that I'm pretty sure is public facing.
Okay.
And that I think is, you know, when you can name yourself the only, the best, the pioneer, you can really claim it, make it part of your messaging, but your you know, part of your storytelling. That's a nice advantage to have. So they were really first to market.
Yeah, and in all fairness, I you know, you have to be careful of things we're talking about also. So
Yeah.
I don't want to. So let's talk about this, right? So how do you know if your brand's off track?
Mm-hmm.
How do you know if it's on track? Really, what I want to get to is some tangible things that anyone's listening to this can ask themselves and ask their team. And if they don't have compelling answers, know that they need to do some work on their brand and how they're positioned.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I go into brands and I feel so bad because I'm like, gosh, I feel like Captain Obvious, you know, and it's like those things where you get so busy that you forget to look at like really important things. It's just all of the urgent and the fires pile up, right? So if you go into your locations and you ask people, well, what it is it that you do, and you don't have a consistent answer, or if the customer says, well, what is it that makes you different? And there's not a consistent answer across every location, or at least let's say 75 to 80% of your locations, you probably have a messaging problem. And I will say that that's pretty common. So I've gone into brands and I will hire a intern that sounds much younger than me. And I will, you know, have them call 20 locations and have them, you know, ask questions as if they're a customer. And it's amazing when you ask somebody, well, you know, at the front desk, like, well, what is it that, you know, why would I come to you versus like the lady down the street? And they're like, I don't know. I mean, I just work the phones. Like, I don't actually do the service. And you're like, bad answer, right? And so I think that consistency of how you're answering the phone, how do you tell people what it is that you do? How does it roll off the tongue? Who is it for? And I think not only is it super important to know what you do is for, it's super important to know who it's not for, right? And so, for example, like, I typically don't work with very mature, established brands. I did a little bit of work with Hershey, but that was it. Mainly, I'm working with startup brands, early stage brands, because sometimes the ideas I bring to the table are pretty unique, and it takes an early stage brand to be able to kind of be like, "Wow, cool, let's try that." So I think you just have to kind of know who it is that you're doing this work for. So, City Row had a good. This is a good example. City Row is a high intensity, low impact workout, which means that they could have intentionally attracted people who have sports injuries. And they intentionally don't want to do that. They just decided that they were not going to be the brand for injured athletes. So, that's really important. It's really important to decide who you're for and who you're not for. You want to create an expert positioning statement. I don't think there's anything wrong with your whole entire system at your convention, knowing where you are in the market and why you're there. If people say to you, and one of the things that I'm also very good at is creating premium brands. Typically, if a brand is not premium priced when I come in, they are when I'm done, because I have a little bit of a bias towards developing a premium brand. And so, why are you the more expensive option? Like, you've got to know that. You have to be really confident and why. And a tagline, a compelling tagline. And all of this needs to be part of your brand messaging. I think what happens a lot of times in social media, or even in your email campaigns, is like you're switching topics a lot. And I'm a big fan of like, find 100 different ways to say the same thing, knowing that people are only going to see 1 in 7 pieces of your content anyways. And that's what's going to create that consistency. So on your website, your homepage, social media bios, introducing yourself in your real life, in the early stages, you are your brand as the founder. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. But that's, something that to really pay attention to in the early stages. And again, I can't recall the names of the Clean Juice founders, but if you look at their Instagram and you look at, they do a beautiful job representing their brand on their personal social media.
Yeah, I mean, look, right now, even with this slide we're looking at, if your team doesn't have in writing right now who your perfect customers are, right? What is, your positioning statement? What is the meaningful tagline for your brand and for those end user customers? Then you're missing brand elements, and they're just signs you haven't done at least a deep dive into developing your brand and really considering it, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Which then, as you're pointing out, leads to messaging that's all over the place, or with the City Row example, someone saying, hey, it's also good for people who have injuries, and then someone saying, sure, let's add that to an advertising.
Yeah. And then it gets super confusing. Yeah.
Right. And you think it's innocent, but it's not innocent, because everything has an impact. So if you don't have these things, if they don't, not generic, but really meaningful differentiators, I think it's important. Which I guess gets to developing copy and content to drive franchise sales, right? And, I think if I'm as a franchisor, the biggest thing or my antenna would pop up as soon as you said, hey, we were closing deals at $1,000 a cost per lead, right? And I think the answer is it's not magic. It was a lot of hard work and that brand integrity. So what's the secret here? How do we generate organic interest, non-broker franchise sales at $1,000 per lead?
Yeah. One of the things that I think a lot of brands underplay, and it's always surprising to me, is that if you are a early stage brand, an emerging brand with a founder that is dynamic and has, a great story, like that founder should become a personal brand. Like that is a no-brainer to me. And I'm surprised how few people really prioritize that. And I think, yes, some PR on, is good. Being on Undercover Boss is nice, right? All of that, if you can get that. But really on Instagram and social media and on LinkedIn, become a thought leader in your category and getting really intentional about that, because people will want to work with you as you develop your personal brand. And I work with, personal brands. I've got 3 personal brand clients right now. One's an influencer, a Christian influencer, actually, which is wonderful. One is a senior executive who is a speaker author, and another one's a mindset coach who's also a professional athlete. But none of the thought leaders that I work with, none of the influencers I work with are CEOs of franchise brands. And it's just the way that franchise development has traditionally played out. But it's always surprising to me, because I'm like, gosh, I look at some of the CEOs of these franchise brands and they're like moms, they're gorgeous, they're, well-spoken, they're aspirational, or there's these really cool guys that are fit and they have opinions on wellness and health and mindset and are articulate. And I just think oh my gosh, you should be speaking from stages and not in the franchise industry in your category. Or even just selling, informational products as a lead generator for franchise sales, or creating an online summit full of other thought leaders in your category, where people get to know you better and you improve your know, like, and trust factor. So I just think there's a lot of things that are happening in the online space that are not being utilized in franchise sales. And it always surprises me, because they're actually pretty inexpensive and easy things to do. But it's not, it's the road less traveled.
It is. And there's, we have a few clients that the founders, and ironically, you see they're very focused on their personal branding, right? And they're very powerful stories, and they're leading a group. Not to get inside of things, but one of our clients, Bella Ballerina, the founder there, it's genuine, right? She has a personal brand. She lives it. And for like-minded, I don't want to say moms out there, they're going to be attracted to her brand. And she's amazing. And what you find is it's very genuine. It's all integrated. So personal branding, I agree on, especially in terms of LinkedIn. But then I think this all connects too, Laura, which a big takeaway for me as we're speaking is there's all different franchise development channels, right? Lead generation, brokers, traditional, not. And I agree with you. What's new is the franchise industry is a little stuck, and that there should be a digital approach, just like other online entrepreneurs. And things when you say like an online summit and things like that, those are so powerful, right? Yeah. Because we have traditional discovery days, but why not have a digital platform for all of this also, right? Because that content becomes very powerful.
Yeah, if people want an example, there's a man named Bedros who has a company called Fit Body Bootcamp. And it's really funny because every now and then I will somehow kind of cross paths with him, like in the online space. Like the woman who runs a coaching program that I've been part of is like one of his really good friends, but she has nothing to do with franchising. And then he'll show up at like a franchise conference. So I've never met him, but I do know that he uses all of those online strategies to have built his very successful company. And he hasn't, he's never used traditional sales channels. He's always sold like online courses and coaching programs as the entry point for franchise sales. And I think he's got like 1 million followers on Instagram or something insane like that too.
Which then gets to, even just in content development. So you talked about personal branding and brand development. Well, that makes your content on LinkedIn that much more powerful, as opposed to not having a voice and not having a reason to be on LinkedIn and these other channels for lead gen, at least.
Yeah.
So big question. And I know there's so much and so many variations, but for an emerging brand, if you could control the dollar spend, and where would you spend your dollars, or how would you recommend spending dollars, and where would be your focus?
So I would definitely be spending marketing dollars on content strategy, like again, thought leadership, informational, I would say informational freemium type of offers with clear, consistent, compelling content. I'm not opposed to paid traffic, but I'd love to see like maybe an online event within a Facebook group and paid traffic going to that versus paid traffic going to some kind of, form that people don't even know what they're filling out. They might be filling it out for, your ballerina concept, and what they really are just looking for is a class for their daughter. I just feel like people, with the paid traffic, it can just get really, really convoluted. So I would just make sure you have a consistent, clear, compelling content strategy and content delivery that educates people on your brand, and just knowing that like content marketing takes longer. It takes longer to start seeing some traction from, but you're going to see a much better lead quality when you go that route.
Which makes sense, right? Because so I don't have a brand strategy. I don't know my differentiators. I just go out there, I start spending money on pay-per-click ads or portal leads. And all of a sudden I find I'm spending money, low quality and low conversion, versus I think it's very interesting what you're saying. And also that first approach is sort of a one-shot approach. I stop spending the money. I stop getting those contacts, and I haven't developed anything compelling that I could reuse, compared to if I develop copy and content and value-added media, say an online event, I pay to drive traffic there. No matter what happens, I have that online content to reuse.
Yeah, that's the lowest cost traffic I'm seeing right now is, Zuckerberg likes to keep traffic in Facebook. So if you have an event and you send paid traffic to the event, or you have a group that has, where you go live every week, I have that for my own company, and you drive paid traffic to an event within the group, it's fractions, pennies compared to dollars for what you're typically seeing for paid spend when you're sending traffic outside of Facebook. So that's just one example.
So if I were just a standard brand, I don't know what industry, let's just say a food industry, a health product, say, or a shake or something in that vein, what type of event would you set up? Would it be about franchise sales? Would it be a combination about the franchise opportunity and healthy living? Like, how would you approach that?
You could talk about making wellness your career, making health and wellness
Okay.
a career path. And you might talk about that topic for months live on your Facebook page. And then you might have a longer webinar that you drive people to that's more informational. Or that might be something that you have a white paper on, and it might not necessarily be only in your brand. It might be something where you're giving some case studies throughout where you're really becoming the thought leader, and you're saying, here's one way to make money at health and wellness. You become an MLM, here's the pros, here's the cons, without having to start from scratch, let's say. That would be a good title. Making health and wellness your career without starting from scratch. You could say, here's MLM, that's one idea, pros, cons, opportunity. Becoming a distributor for something, maybe that's different than MLM. And then we have this franchise opportunity here. And this is something that you might want to consider if you are the type of person who, wants to have brick and mortar, wants to have, create a community in your area, wants a more predictable business plan, and is really looking for that long-term asset that you're going to develop over time that you don't get with MLM. So like that type of education could be really helpful for somebody who wants to make a career switch to health and wellness, but just doesn't really know how. And they know that they don't want to start something from scratch.
So, and what I love about that, Laura, is the multi-purposing there. So now you've developed that webinar, right? So you could develop a ton of copy from the content of that webinar, but now also when a franchisee comes to your franchise sales landing page, instead of just filling out a form and with static information, they could either download the webinar or they could access the webinar right there. And I think that becomes valuable. And I think I do believe spending money just to drive prospects to a form to fill out on your website is a waste of money. 99 out of 100 times.
I just think why would you, right? Like, why would you? The other thing you can do is, start to host events and dinners and go around, where you have locations already and do informational nights. So there's so many cool things that you can do to develop franchise development without going the traditional route. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of brands who have built their business on the traditional route. And I'm thinking if I have worked with them, sure, I would say that almost all the franchise brands that I've worked with have gone with brokers and portals, and less portals, more brokers, probably sales teams. As an early stage brand, you just have to know, paying somebody like me a couple $1,000s a month to come up with your content strategy and deploy it for you is just, while it's money that you're spending that you don't have right now to give up that fee, it's just, you've got to then plan on how you're going to fund the operations of getting those people open.
Correct.
You got to really think about that, because that is the bottleneck that most early stage brands find themselves in when they make $3,000 on their $32,000 franchise fee.
Yeah. And I'm okay with all the channels, right? I think brokers serve a critical role.
Yeah.
Tremendous. But what I don't want are brands that, first, if you can't gain traction, and especially for startups and many emerging, it's hard to get that broker interest, and for good reason. There's a lot of competition. But say broker sales are going well and traditional routes are going well, there's no reason why you shouldn't be building up your content strategy, because and that's the lever you pull in 12 months from now, and that builds up that that organic or natural lead generation. And ironically, that content may also maximize broker relations and help with broker conversions. So I think they all work together. Absolutely.
And I think that there's a place for both, right? And again, I think it's really important. This is something that they don't talk about that much at conventions is, we always spent the franchise fee because we spent such a little amount of money on franchise development, we spent that franchise fee on getting people open. And it costs every penny of it. It really does. You don't think it will, but it does.
Well, yeah, well, I mean, it does. But more and more, I think the trends are that emerging brands are not getting the revenue or capital from the franchise fee, and I understand why. But the cause of that, or that could be a symptom of another problem, which is they're not building independence. They're not focusing on their copy. They're not differentiating their brands, which are all the things we've talked about here. So Laura, I know and I apologize to everyone on the webinar in the sense I've sort of jumped the gun on all these slides as I'm listening to Laura. But like we were talking about brands that you think are getting it right. You gave us these examples here.
Yeah.
What's getting it right here, and what's your thoughts?
I want to tell the story behind these brands because I happen to follow Hintwater. I'm a business nerd, in case you haven't noticed. I follow both franchise brands and traditional brands. And what's really interesting is that Hintwater is this, very healthy water with no calories, no sugar. It's actual just fruit and water. Like amazing, right? Like, why didn't we think of this? This is the thing that we always wonder. And they are exploding in growth. And the founder did something very gutsy. Most of her distribution was on Amazon. And the thing about selling on Amazon is not only that you're paying them a significant part of your sales, but you do not get access to the data. So she made a very bold decision to pull it off of Amazon and start offering memberships, water memberships on her website that has been incredibly popular. Not only did she double sales, but now she's able to engage one-on-one with the customer now that she's got this data. So if you're part of the membership, the water membership, which yes, I am, you get like trial products. You get sunscreen that doesn't actually like burn your kid's skin. You get all of these great products in the mail, and she's, looking to engage with you. She wants to have a relationship with you. And it's like, as a mom, as a woman who, wants to stay healthy, but like sick of drinking just water. Here's the second thing she learned. A huge portion of her customer base has diabetes. So she ended up creating a whole marketing campaign around targeting people with diabetes, just from being able to have access to that data. And then what's amazing to me about traditional brands is these traditional food brands are like, what do you mean people don't want junk in their water? Like that's so confusing to them. So it's very interesting to me what's happening in food and wellness. So Amy from Cauliflower Foods is a friend of mine. And she also is just like killing it. She has gluten-free, additive-free. She's one of Storybrand's biggest success stories. I'm not allowed to tell her revenue, but it's a lot. And so, she's killing it with online sales and distribution. And then you've got all of these craft who can't figure out that people actually don't want like preservatives in their food, or they actually want gluten-free crusts, or like they actually don't want a lot of like junk in their pizza crust. So it's very interesting to me how the reason why I want to choose these few examples is that I wanted to share with you that as an emerging brand, it can feel like sometimes you're at a disadvantage, but you're actually at an advantage because you can move faster, you can tap into your customer data, you can get a handle on what people want, and you get it a lot of times in ways that the big traditional companies can't, because it's so hard to move a ship that's big. That's built on maybe, values that people don't necessarily want anymore. And these small little companies like Hintwater, Cauliflower Foods are like smoking them because they have such a good connection to their customer through social media. They know who their customer is and what they want. And they have a great handle on what the trends are in the marketplace when it comes to food that doesn't make you sick. It's really cool.
Yeah, no, I wasn't sure where you were going with this, but I mean, it's an amazing point, right? Which gets to the overall, Laura, which is that I love that you say that emerging brands are at an advantage, right? They are.
Yeah.
And then if I tie all of this together and go back to my belief in the point you're making, which is as an emerging brand, traditional channels of franchise sales growth, consumer growth, they're fine, but there's a whole other medium they're not taking advantage of. I don't think the industry's taking advantage of it. And I think as an emerging brand, a startup brand, this is your leverage point. This is where you could get the magic. And, this is, part of your advantage. And, it may sound simple or it may sound like there's a lot of things we're talking about, but I think if I had to boil it down, it's start with the brand, start with the differentiators, start with your brand story, your value proposition, align your team, and from there you could build. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've created so many operational toolkits for my clients. Like I could talk to you about all the influencer toolkits and the community building toolkits and the community table toolkits and the, social media toolkits. And like, we didn't even talk about any of that because honestly, it doesn't matter until you have a brand strategy. People have asked me like, what are the other toolkits you've made for other brands? I'm like, it doesn't matter. What matters is what's right for your brand.
Laura, we're gonna put up what's your website that people could go to?
Yeah, it's joybrandcreative.com.
Joybrandcreative.com, and we'll put that up. And then, look, for everyone who's listening to this, I know what's discussed here is definitely a lever for growth. It's not easy to break down your brand and really align it, but it's necessary. Mm-hmm. And then for anyone, I've worked with Laura in a number of instances. And quite frankly, as you're speaking, Laura, I'm like sitting here excited. I'm like, oh, we should get Laura to work with our team here, or ask Laura to work with our team. Yeah. But Laura's agent, so Joybrand and a number of things. I know you work on branding strategy, content marketing, and then you also have a coaching program, correct?
I do. I have a coaching program for business owners. I currently don't have any franchisors in there right now, but if there's a small franchisor that's on a limited budget, no reason why you can't go in there too. You're going to be in there with some early stage entrepreneurs, but it's a great, or if you want to put your marketing person into that program too, that's a great fit. So you might be kind of popping in and out to help with the brand strategy, but they may be then creating the marketing, the content plan and creating content and providing it to me for feedback when they've been hot seated. So I did that because I hang in a lot of small business circles and I was getting a lot of requests. My retainer services start at $2,500, which is not a fortune. That's the really cool thing about what I offer is I am boutique, I'm small. The people on my team are mostly, C-suite marketing executives that are now home with their kids and their families. So I have very talented people, but we operate very lean, and we pass it on to the client. So it's much more boutique and much less expensive than a big agency would be, which is a nice position to be in. But if you're at a place where, that would even be too much for you, being part of the coaching program could be a great fit. And it's called Brand Accelerator.
Okay. It's on your main website or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And anyone who's interested, we're going to get all this information out. Laura, I really appreciate all the time and the great information you provided us with on the slides and everything else.
Yeah, I'm so glad. It was so fun. I love talking about this stuff and I love, chatting with you. So that's awesome.
Laura, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care, Laura.
Thank you for having me.